Awesome, man. Thanks a lot. So, hello, everyone. Um, Welcome to the 64th webinar on a treatise on cosmic fire. Um, Mikhail is in the MVD in Canada and a lot of background noise. So I'm going to be calling on you all during this session. This webinar series is available on makara.us under the subheadings Morning Federation webinars and then webinar series in progress as shown here. All episodes of this, The Secret Teachings of All Ages, and the Secret Doctrine series are also available on YouTube. Just do a search for Francis Donald and the webinar you wish to view. You can join any of these webinars on the homepage of moriafederation.com. If you've lost your email link, they're all right up here in the upper left-hand corner of the homepage. You just click on those and you can get right in. Okay, last time we continued with the final division of section 1 entitled the Law of Economy, where we learned about the last of the three laws, the law of synthesis, which governs those that respond to the first aspect of divinity. Quote, the first aspect, or the will to exist, is governed by the law of synthesis, and the activities of the cosmic entities who are its embodiments are governed by the law of enforced unity and of essential homogeneity. So we have a couple of more descriptors there of this law. These are just quick reviews of the law of attraction and the law of synthesis. The main thrust of this chapter is the law of economy, which pretty much just ends this whole section of TCF. In fact, this webinar will probably be our last one on this section, and then next time we'll be starting on the uh, the main section 2 of a treatise on cosmic fire, which is all about the second aspect, the soul, um, the solar angels, and it's over 1,000 pages, that second section. It's most of the book, really. Anyway, this last law, talking about the law of synthesis, to come into play in the evolutionary arc demonstrates as abstraction, spiritual liberation, destruction of form through the withdrawal of spirit, which is the destroyer aspect, absolute homogeneity and absolute essential unity, and progressive forward motion. So the law of attraction gave us relative homogeneity. The purpose is alignment, harmony, and right relationship, which is a relative union or homogeneity. But in this last law, we have what is called absolute essential unity. After making a statement about the, quote, wonderful synthesis brought about by the evolutionary working of these three cosmic laws, DK focuses in on the law of economy, which initiates and governs the involutionary cycle, thereby leading to the sevenfold differentiation of the cosmic physical plane. It governs matter, and even on the evolutionary arc, the activity of matter is governed by the law of economy, even though the human kingdom is responding to the law of attraction. DK then compares and contrasts the purpose of each of the three main laws. The law of economy results in the sevenfold differentiation in the matter of the system. The law of attraction results in the sevenfold psychic differentiation of the sons of mind. This is what brings into activity the seven rays. And the law of synthesis results in the sevenfold perfection of the same Manasaputras. So ultimately, the law of synthesis comes forward both when we come under monadic influence, but also at the end of a cycle before pralaya ensues, and we begin to respond to what's called the day be with us, which is return to pure spirit. Okay, then after touching on the subsidiary laws of the law of economy very briefly, DK tells us that the law of economy is swept into action by the sounds uttered by the logos. This introduces a major new theme, which he explores through a coming footnote as well. These sounds are permutations of the sacred word, which, though in reality is but one word, has several syllables. We then learn that, quote, the syllables all together form a solar phrase. Separated, they form certain words of power, producing different effects. This statement references a long, you can see the footnote here, a long but fascinating footnote from Some Thoughts on the Gita, which we got into last session. In the footnote, we learned that, quote, the Veda is the world song and human sound that was given to man for his use metaphysically from the standpoint of its meaning and magically from the standpoint of its proper recitation. So this Vedic song, we're told, obeys certain laws of proportions, which were put forth by Pythagoras. We then learned about Vishvakarma, who in esoteric Hinduism is the great cosmic geometrizer. The author then describes the descent of sound into the world of form, which comes forth from the essential Om, the OM, which, quote, necessarily split itself into a primal three, a subsequent 7 vowels, and then into 7 notes, and then into 7 combinations of the 7 notes on a basic 3, and then into hymns. And this, we talked about this last time. So, as always, if you want to review, you can always just pick up the last session on YouTube or Makara. This pretty much takes us up to where we left off last time. So we're in the middle of the footnote, and next up, the footnote continues. Could we get a reader, please? And you could just raise your hand. Mikhail won't be calling on you today. So if you're willing to read, please raise your hand. Otherwise, I'll pull up the participants and call on you. Any volunteers? Yes, Nadal, thank you.
All these falling into the material field of the consonants gradually produce the manifested crystallized forms, which are collectively taken as the universe. The world to a thinker is the magic motion produced by the Orphean singer or the Hindu Saraswati. In the Vishnu Purana, second part, you will see that the power that resides in the sun is represented as the three-sided Vedic power. That power as Rik creates, as Yajas preserves, and as Sama destroys. Rik is therefore the creative song of the Devas in the sun, Yajas the son of preservation, and Sama the song of destruction of the Devas in the sun and construction of the Devas in the moon. Rik, therefore, is the song of the Devas, and Sama the song of the Pitris, and Yajua the intermediate song. The functions of the Vedas must, of course, vary according to the standpoint. If you take the Pitris, Sama is their constructive song, and Rik is their destructive note. The three Vedas correspond to every trinity in nature, and I request you will search for further information in the much abused Puranas.
Okay, so first, by the way, as always, I very much encourage um, questions and comments if you have any during uh, about any of the material at all. Please raise your hand. Okay, so first up, all these falling into the material field of the consonants gradually produced the manifested crystallized forms, which are collectively taken as the universe. So we just read that, the Om split first into three, then into seven vowels, then into seven notes, um, and then into seven combinations of the seven notes. Um, that's what's falling into the material field of the consonants. Um, and this reinforces the idea that consonants represent the material or form aspect, and vowels represent quality, meaning, and intention, the life aspect, um, rather than the form aspect. Together, they make up the creative potency of magically directed speech, the specifics of which are secrets of initiation. Next, the world to a thinker is the magic motion produced by the Orphean singer or the Hindu Sarasvati. Okay, a world thinker in this context is one who is able to perceive the creative forces that animate the cosmic etheric planes. Um, we can, at the fourth initiation, one becomes a planetary being, a planetary citizen, shifts their perspective onto the lower Buddhic plane, and might hypothesize that it's at this point that the initiate becomes a true world thinker. The quote, magic motion produced by the Orphean singer or the Hindu Sarasvati are two examples of a specific manipulation of these higher forms, higher word forms, and energies to produce tangible, magical results. The magicians being Orpheus and Sarasvati. Orpheus was renowned for his enchanting music, so powerful that it could move not just the hearts of his human listeners, but also the plant and animal kingdoms. We read a little bit about him last time. And Sarasvati is not only the goddess of knowledge, art, and music, but also a divine embodiment of pure creative energy. For instance, a verse from the Rig Veda says, Om Ayam Sarasvatiai Nama, which means salutations to the one who delights in playing the Veena. The difference between these two is that Orpheus was an avatar. He actually incarnated um, in early Greek times, and whereas Sarasvati is a goddess. Um, and so she overshadowed the Indian avatars of that time, of an earlier time actually. Okay, next, in the Vishnu Purana, second part, you will see that the power that resides in the sun is represented as the three-sided Vedic power, that the power as Rik creates, as I don't know if this is a hard J or soft J. I'm going to say it as a hard J, Yajus, preserved, and as Sama, destroys. So the three-sided Vedic power is the same as the three logoi of theosophy. Of course, there's going to be difference in details, but we're looking at the Shiva, Vishnu, and Brahmic aspect of Hinduism, here called Sama, Yajus, and Rik, as described in the next statement, but with an emphasis on these potencies as song. Quote, Rik is therefore the creative song of the Devas in the sun. So that's the Brahmic aspect manifesting through sound. Yajus, the song of preservation, and Sama, the song of destruction of the Devas in the sun, and construction of the Devas in the moon. That's an interesting dual role. So anyway, Rik is the song that initiates creation at a solar systemic level, initiates a cycle. This mirrors the role of the Rig Veda, which is filled with hymns celebrating the origins and generative forces of the cosmos. Next, Rik, therefore, is the song of the Devas, and Sama, the song of the Pitris, and Yajua, the intermediate song. So in theosophy, solar Pitris are the cosmic divine progenitors who play an active role in the evolutionary and spiritual development of humanity. Lunar Pitris are associated with the development of the form aspect of humanity. The Sama Veda is seen as a mode of vibration that not only destroys, but also reconstructs. This parallels the role of the Pitris, who through ancestral memory and legacy dissolve the old forms and enable new phases of life and consciousness to emerge. Next, the functions of the Vedas must, of course, vary according to the standpoint. If you take the Pitris, Sama is their constructive song, and Rik is their destructive note. So here the author reverses the usual order of the songs without really developing this concept. It's this reversal takes place because of the perspective, but since he doesn't develop this concept, it's difficult to know just what is being indicated. And then finally, the three Vedas correspond to every trinity in nature, and I request you will search for the further information in the much abused Puranas. So the fundamental trinity or Trimurti in the Puranas is Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, whose feminine counterparts are Sarasvati, Lakshmi, and Parvati. Other trinities, such as the three gunas, Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas, also appear. They were much abused by, the English, who India was a colony of the British Empire from about 1650, and the governors of England did all they could to suppress the uh, the Hindu philosophical beliefs of the local Hindus. This is one of the things that uh, H.P. Blavatsky and her partner, Colonel Olcott, did much to fight against and were quite successful. Um, Also in the fight to restore Buddhism, especially in the south of India, but also but they championed the Puranas as well. So hands, yes, great. Joe?
Francis, I think I have either a really important question or one that's total nonsense. The idea is that there's a song involved, and then the song is made up of consonants and syllables. And I begin thinking in English and say, I know of 5, maybe 6 sounds. And where does the 7th one come from? Because we always know we have 3 plus 4. You want more explanation on that? My question.
Well, I don't hear a question yet.
Oh, okay. We seem to be speaking about 7 rays, for example, or 7 sounds of the rays. And they are associated with vowels and consonants. And in English, we have 5 vowels, unless you include Y, which would make a 6. And then I'm thinking maybe the 7th sound that we're looking for is silence itself. This all feels foundational to, and yet we're talking about the law of economy. We're not talking about sound per se.
Right. Okay. Well, first of all, that's just in English that, we have 7 vowels. I mean, 5 vowels. And it's a good point, A, E, I, O, U, as we all know, and then the Y, mostly a written vowel that is sounded often uh, either like I or E, depending on the context, right? Um, but I think that we have to look at the native language here. In fact, I think we go to Sanskrit in order to determine the nature of these 7 vowels. Um, and ultimately even Senzar in order, because these are uh, uh, great potencies. These are, these 7 vowels are going to be related to these 7 planes of the cosmic physical plane. They're going to be related to the 7 brothers Fohad. They're creative potencies, right? So we can't get too literal about trying to translate them, but they're definitely related to our English vowels, because after all, a sound like O or Ah is a fundamental vocalization, and they're going to have their correspondences to these 7 that are being described here. Um, what's interesting is that uh, uh, we also have 7 notes, which suggests to me, we explored this a little last time, but suggests to me pitches, right? And then 7 combinations of the 7 notes, which to me suggests, on a basic 3. Now, I'm not sure what that means, except for that they would have to do with the 3 fundamental energies, but it would suggest combinations of the vowels and the pitches. And Sanskrit is known for the quote unquote pitch variations when speaking it. In fact, they say that for a mantra to actually demonstrate its inherent power, it has to be sounded forth not only correctly in terms of the vowels, but also in terms of the pitches. And of course, this could be a very complicated relationship or quote unquote song, right? Yeah, so in all that, I kind of forgot your question. But that's when you move then into consonants, you're actually giving word form to the potencies that are created but are also inherent in the 7 vowels and the 7 notes. Then it's almost like you take those many combinations and you use them to animate a particular form. Okay. Oh, that brought up a lot of interest. Okay, starting with Barbara.
Yes, so we usually think of the sun as involved with Fohat and electricity and light, the rays that really create momentum. So sound is more a rippling out vibration. So I'm wondering about um, why the Devas are working with sound and the major logos are working with Fohat.
Well, actually, I see it the other way around in a lot of ways. Every plane within the cosmic physical plane, so really every subplane, has both sounds and electrical, uh, um, you could call it demonstration of the life aspect through electricity, right? So it's not that one is higher than the other. We know from what he says in the earlier part of this that um, the Om is initiated by the Solar Logos and in its purest form, um, but that um, um, that Om is, even though it's one word, is in fact um, has a number of syllables, and that initiates differentiation. Those syllables of that primary or fundamental word. That's what initiates um, the new cycle of manifestation, right? Um, it is then picked up by and carried forward by a series of Davic lords, and they work directly with the brothers Fohat, as they are called, or these intelligent electrical potencies at each subplane of the cosmic physical plane in order to create the appropriate forms to to carry the life aspect. Um, and the question is then becomes, at what level do consonants come forward? I would think it might be in the lower quaternary that you move from the pure informing sound, that has a increasing complexity into the actual form world, starting with the monastic plane. Okay, did that touch on your thought or your concern, Barbara?
Yeah, so I think that uh, there is perhaps a primal energy, as you say, um, in the primordial sounds. And even though we describe them as sounds, they have a phohatic force behind them. Is that
Fohat is ultimately a third aspect energy. We know this from a treatise on cosmic fire. That's why Fohat is so dealt with. But we have to remember that the form world extends all the way up and through the Adi plane of the cosmic physical plane. That's why there's 7 differentiations of Fohat. So, but they bind spirit and form, right? And the means by which uh, that the signal, you could say, uh, to do that is the word that goes forth. You could call that the command, right? But it also carries the potency initially from the logos, which Fohat then binds into form. Okay. So that's its nature and purpose. Then on the evolutionary cycle, they release spirit from form at the appropriate time. Its role reverses as we move through the initiations. I think there's a lot of um, use and manipulation of phohatic energy done through the rod of initiation on the upward journey, which unbinds spirit from form and then rebinds it in a more appropriate form, in a higher form.
Thank you.
Yes. Maria Christina.
Hi. Going back to the 7 vowels, the 7 vowels sometimes are referred to the A, E, I, O, U, and then Y, as Joe mentioned, and then sometimes W, like in snow, a form of W that would be the 7th. When you look at it in the English language, those are the 7 that are referred to. Interestingly, I looked it up. So A, I, O, U, Y, and W. Woo. I don't know. Yeah, it's soft, I guess. I don't know. Just that's all.
Yeah, it's because the W can be sustained. You can hold it's very much like M, except for it's more open. You know, you can go, ooh,
Snow.
without it resolving into the O, which would be whoa or wah or whatever. You can hold the W sound and so it resonates. But to my mind, it's has the qualities of the third aspect, which would be like the M, which can also be sustained, right? Now, the question is, how do these relate? They obviously do relate, but how do they relate to the 7 Sanskrit or even higher Sinzar vowels, which are determining potencies rather than, or I should say, in addition to parts of speech. In other words, the parts of speech is the very lowest final resolution of these great 7 potencies. Okay, Ariane.
Yes. So whom are we speaking of when we say that these sounds are being generated? Who's generating the sounds that you're speaking about?
The logos, and then they're carried forward by the lords, Davic lords, but the initiating source is logoic.
And what do you mean by the logos? I'm
The
sorry.
solar logos initiates the manifestation of the solar system, and then after the 7 ray lords come into being, they also become master magicians who initiate their own systems.
And what about Sanskrit? It's supposed to be like a vibratory language. I think that's what you're alluding to when you talk about sound is vibration. So who gave Sanskrit to humanity and how does one understand it in terms of vibration? Like the vibration I think is supposed to be as important as the meaning behind the sound.
vibration is going to be the magical potency of a particular vowel. In other words, it's what initiates the vibratory. Gosh, I says when you if for instance you're bringing uh, uh, form and life together on a particular plane. So we'll start with the uh, monadic plane, right? Then that's going to be initiated by a logoic sound, which is a projection of a vibratory quality that engages that that particular subplane, the as yet quiescent um, form aspect of that subplane, right? Because the subplane itself is a potential form. So there's a note that excites or engages that particular level, and that's going to have to do with a particular sound quality, vibratory quality, very, very specific. The AUM, which is the three great fields of sound, the A sound, the U sound, and the M sound, great fields of sound, contain within them many, many lesser sounds, which it just begins to indicate in this last uh, phrase here. And those are used by the knowers of high Davic beings and logoi to initiate the process. There's an absolutely beautiful description of the process in the second stanza of Zahn in A Treatise on Cosmic Fire, at the very beginning of this book, round page 35. That's where the stanzas, I think, begin. And it's the second stanza. It's about 4 or 5 pages that describe the sound moving from plane to plane and engaging the Davic lives of each of those planes. Selena.
Hi. So I might be totally out in left field with this one, but I can't stop thinking of the chakras and the 7 chakras, and each chakra carries its own vowel in Sanskrit, and it also carries its own sound. And if you harmonize each sound in each chakra, it releases whatever needs to be released back into the atmosphere. Now, if I were to take water and vibrate certain sounds into the water, it would change the structure of the molecules within the water, depending on where what the sounds are, what the vibrational sound is. So the Om being the third eye, but you have the different sounds that carry all the way up your chakras, which is what helps to kind of alleviate you and accelerate your soul into is it the aspheric plane? Is that, do I have that right or
Well,
completely wrong?
what you're saying is that totally correct. And it's true both macrocosmically, which is what we've been discussing, in terms of like initiating manifestation, and microcosmically, within the body of a human being, right? Because the chakras of both the solar logos and the planetary logos are also responsive to sounds, and they're really brought into activity, as through sounds. You could say they're awakened for the that particular cycle of becoming through sound in the same way. And of course, with human beings, it's they come into active resonance on the path of return. So we've been talking about this whole section deals with the involutionary process of informing spirit into matter, whereas the um, the process of the rising Kundalini is the lifting of the essence of spirit that is asleep in the root chakra and bringing up through the chakras the life aspect until it meets the head center and therefore uh, purifies and burns the entire system, or which is really to say that it synthesizes the entire system and all is lifted to the next level. The usual teaching on that process in decay doesn't talk that much about use of sound in order to initiate that. But it certainly is a part of it because the OM is considered a word to be used in order to purify and raise our own vibration. Of course, that's a very general statement. There's a school that deals. We talked about it last time. I forgot. Is it Shastra? I think it's Shastra, which is the science of the use of sound to initiate each chakra in sequence. But of course, that's extremely dangerous unless you're under the supervision of a master and it's used judiciously. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Barbara, do you have something else?
I was just wondering about the archetypes that before even sounds come into manifestation, there's an archetypal form. And so I'm wondering if it in that archetypal form that there's a geometry, there is light and sound all together, and when sound actually emerges, it may have some of that geometry and some light as well.
Yeah, that's a great question. This gets back to the idea of Mula Prakriti, which is the shining sea of substance, which is complete homogeneity. This is the Divine Mother in its purest form, which is undifferentiated form, right? It's undifferentiated matter. It's not form yet because form is created through the combination of spirit and matter into specific congeries of matter, right? And that's done by the second aspect. But and you could say that divine, what would you call it? It's like great repository of all matter and its purest essence also carries in it all of the potential possibilities that come into being through the word. So, when the word goes forth, then Fohat working with matter creates the appropriate forms for the various subplanes of the cosmic physical plane. Maria Christina.
Oh, that was lovely. Thank you. As you were speaking, Mula Prakriti, what came to mind was just before the AUM is the OM. I would think that the O, the 0, and then the M right at the very center of that little representing that point that has neither width nor depth nor height. In the center of that very archetypical, when you were speaking, came to mind in terms of Barbara's question.
Yeah, you can look at the OM as a descriptor of the circle with the point in the center, you know, and when you do that, you put the O for the point and you put the M for the circumference, right? Because that's its ring past knot of manifestation, which is represented by the M sound. But it's
Oh, that's
actually,
backward, huh? I'll have to think about that one. That's inside out.
yeah, it's the opposite of what you would think. But it's actually the AUM that is used in the evolutionary process. You know, that's what sounded forth sequentially in order to drive spirit into matter. You know, for us as evolutionary disciples on the return path, we don't use that sound. We use the OM in order to call forth the soul aspect, which is
Yes.
is you could say vibratorily brought into I want to say
Thank
excited,
you.
or
Mhm.
it's the vibration of the soul when sounded correctly and silently within the head. That's a sound that draws the soul. Uh, you know, or you could say aligns us with the soul would be one way to say it.
Thank you.
Okay, Diana is telling us some stuff here. Sanskrit has 13 vowels. Okay, and she then lists them, um, and uh, they very subtly, you know, you have the A, then you have the A, then you have the A, then you have the E, uh, then you have that uh, I repeated, which obviously is a subtle shift in the sound of E. Then you have the U, then you have the ooh of you. Then you have an R with a dot below it. I have no idea how that sounded. You see, that's it. There are sounds that we um, are not mentally aware of. That is, we haven't intellectually distinguished the sounds that are being described here. They would seem to us as combinations of the vowels that we know. Um, but yeah, and then Deanna goes on to say there are also 2 additional letters that modify vowels, sometimes including making a total of 15. So, you know, in this teaching from this very learned Brahman, um, who was a fellow of the Theosophical Society. That's what Brahman FTS stands for. He's choosing um, uh, 7 of those vowels. Now, ultimately, since the manifestation is sevenfold, then we are looking then at 7 primary vowel sounds. And just how that would line up with Sanskrit is way beyond my pay grade. But thanks for that. It was interesting. And Carol.
Hi.
Hi.
It's only that I'm just a bit confused from what you've said. When I'm doing meditations, because it varies with whom you're working with sometimes. Sometimes it is the AUM that you're chanting, and other times it's the OM that you're chanting, and it sounds like it matters. So which one should I be doing for meditation and clearing the aura and running cleansing through my home? Which ones are applicable?
Okay. DK, there's this extraordinary quote from DK that says that um, the AUM uh, is has the effect on the user of like a strong wind pinning him or her to a wall, right, when it's used, suggesting to me anyway that it's definitely the OM for all evolutionary work. You know, now possibly in advanced magical processes where you actually are drawing down particular um, vibratory energies, you know, there may be a place for the AUM. It's not in, it's not in theosophy, especially the dual theosophy, it is not part of the curriculum, you could say. So that's the general rule. Um, and, you know, I would recommend a word search within the um, Alice Bailey material to get further insight on the nature of the two. It's the book Initiation Human and Solar is one of the best sources of information on these two forms of the sacred word.
Well, that's so important because it has practical aspects and we don't want to do something unsafe.
Yeah, you know, DK says that most of us are protected by our uh, uh, lack of knowledge of how to actually uh, uh, send the word forth. You know, um, in other words, just because we go Om, it doesn't mean that it gets that it's actually affects has the effect that you have in mind. You know, uh, it's a word that describes a whole body of sound um, that is um, divided into the O, which is the spirit aspect, and the M, which is the form aspect, right? And the intention in using the word and the specific uh, nature of the use, for instance, where you hold the word, DK tells us to hold it as high in the head as possibly, also tells us that silently sounding it is more potent than um, actually sounding it out loud, but then he will, in different meditative exercises, have you do both, even in the same meditation. You'll have you sound it silently, followed by a sounding out loud. So it's not just it's not there's a lot to it. Let's just put it that way.
I can add one thing on that. I was told whether it's said aloud or in your head, it actually affects a different body.
Okay,
And that kind of makes sense.
yeah, it does.
Thanks.
Selena.
Hi. So when I was doing some research on the AUM and when I would feel it like throughout my body and the difference of saying it, I found out that the A and the U stand for creation and consciousness, and the M, if it is destruction. So it made me think that you wouldn't want to hold the M for too long, starting with the short A to start the creation and then bring in the consciousness. And then within destruction, there's always growth, but like knowing as to where your focal point and your, going with your intentions, I suppose.
Right, the way
I
DK
thought that was really interesting.
it is, and you're right. The DK teaches this again in Initiation Human and Solar. He tells us that the A is associated with the spirit aspect, the U with consciousness, and the M with the third aspect or the material aspect. That the three letters together drive spirit into form. That's its purpose, right? So that's what happens when you use that word. You're driving spirit into form because you end with the M, and in that you are embodying, right? That's the very
Right.
purpose of it. Um, you know, I would have to, you know, brush up on it because, you could say, well, what about OM? OM, also ends in M. But there is, all I can say is that the recommendation is that on the path of becoming, that the OM is used
Cool.
rather than the AUM.
Right, right. I've also read that there's this have sort of the same meaning. It's just different pronunciations, but the AUM being the like original from the Vedas.
Well, there's more to it than that.
Yeah, well, yeah.
The AUM are three great fields of words, right?
Right.
They're like dictionaries. They're like three books that form together a great compendium, and there are beings who are associated with each of those letters. So it's huge, if you're a white magician, you literally manipulate Davic substance, and depending on what your purpose is, devas are brought into activity through the specific use of these words that we're talking about. We're only getting the kindergarten version. I'd say even preschool, not even kindergarten. We're getting, the AUM, they're harmless, right? Because there's no information attached, no talk about how to use them attached to the giving of the information that they exist. So again, if any of you that are interested, Initiation Human and Solar is this terrific section. It's really, in fact, it's so good that it's copied verbatim into a treatise on cosmic fire, page after page. Uh, I discovered when we were just a few pages back when we were going through this section on the sound that it's all comes from Initiation Human and Solar. So he felt it important enough to put it in his very first book. So that would, those of you who are particularly interested, that's a great source, at least to get up to that, to move from preschool to kindergarten.
Cool. Thank you, Francis.
And then I think for first grade, you're going to have to go find a guru that specializes in Shastra, right? And might have to wait for another lifetime for that one.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Anyone else? It's an absolutely fascinating topic. Okay, so we are doing this section. We were talking about how consonants are crystallized forms. And let me see. Yeah, we talked about the thinker and magic. We looked at those two, and we talked about the fact that these three words, Rik, Yajus, and Sama, are variations on the three the Brahma, Vishnu, and Shivic aspects. And so I'll pick up here. Next, Rik therefore is the song of the Devas, and Sama the song of the Pitris, and Yajua the intermediate song. We did this. Yeah, because we did that. Yeah, and we even did this. If we were talking about the perspective. Right, we did this page. Okay. Sorry, sometimes when I get into these long question and answer, I lose my place. So let's go ahead and finish the footnote. Can we get a reader, please? Just raise your hand if you're willing to read. Otherwise, I'll pull somebody up. Anybody? Okay, Carol, thank you.
Of the various karmic agencies wielded by man in the way of molding himself in the surroundings, sound or speech is the most important, for to speak is to work in ether, which of course rules the lower quaternary or elements, air, fire, water, and earth. Human sound or language contains therefore all the elements required to move the different classes of devas, and those elements are of course the vowels and the consonants. The details of the philosophy of sound in its relation to the devas, who preside over the subtle world, belong to, oh, something just moved, to the domain of the true mantra sastra, which of course is in the hands of the knowers, from the Some Thoughts on the Gita.
Okay, yeah, so this whole footnote is from Some Thoughts on the Gita. So first, the various karmic agencies wielded by man in the way of molding himself and his surroundings, sound or speech is the most important. For to speak is to work in ether, which of course rules the lower quaternary or elements, air, fire, water, and earth. So the author here suggests that speech is even more important than thought and actions because it quote unquote works in ether. DK gives us a fascinating tabulation that indicates the place speech holds in the hierarchy of creative sound. Could we get a reader for this, please? Okay, and Veronica, can you read?
Yes. 1. The voice of earth, physical. 2. The voices of desire, astral. 3. Speech or formulated thought of the mind, mental. The still small voice of the Christ within, Buddhic. The sounds of the gods, the creative words, Atmic. The word or sound, the AUM, monadic. The breath, logoic.
Thank you. So this helps clarify the quality aspect of sound, right? I was just looking back over this quote. So the author of Some Thoughts on the Gita says that speech is the most important because to speak is to work in ether. And we have to keep in mind that in the lower quaternary, the four highest subplanes of each plane are etheric. And there you could say are the true expressions of the four elements, right? With earth, the highest subplane of the physical plane being having as its elemental expression this what is called earth. You have to understand that these are numeral or source of the actual elements as we know them. Water, of course, for the astral, and at numeral level, fire for the mental, and air for the Buddhic plane. You could also, since he's calling this the lower quaternary, you could divide the mental plane into higher and lower mental for air and fire. One possibility. Anyway, next, human sound or language contains therefore all the elements required to move the different classes of Davis. And those elements are, of course, the vowels and the consonants. Of course, the speaker's intention, level of consciousness, and awareness of the effects of a given mantra or magical command plays a big part. In short, one's place on the path and awareness of the potency of the sound plays a huge part. You know, DK says that most of humanity is actually unconscious black magicians because they say negative things, not realizing the great potency that comes through speech, you know, with no intention to create, you know, black magical forms. But in fact, that's what happens. They're fortunately not long lasting because there's no power in through the will aspect. But then as one comes into greater awareness, this power increases, which is why the idea of silence is a very important concept for the disciple, knowing when to be silent and when to speak. Okay, finally, the details of the philosophy of sound in its relation to the devas who preside over the subtle world belong to the domain of true mantra shastra. So that's what I've been referring to before, which of course is in the hands of the knowers. So mantra shastra is an ancient Vedic discipline that centers on the study and practical application of sacred sound as a transformational force, using dhvani or vibration, which focuses on the energy associated with each syllable or seed sound, called in this discipline bija and varna, which is the structure and form of the words and syllables used, including meter and pitch. So we get just a peek into the associations with various parts of the body in terms of the sound relationships. You could see how a deep study this is just from this. And that brings us back to the main text. So could we get a reader, please? Ariane, thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
The great wood that peels through 100 years of Brahma or persists in reverberation throughout a solar system is the sacred sound of Aum. In differentiation, as heard in time and space, each of those three mystic letters stands for the first letter of a subsidiary phrase consisting of various sounds. One letter, with a sequence of 4 sounds, makes up the vibration or note of Brahma, which is the intelligence aspect dominant in matter. Hence the mystery hidden in the pentagon, in the 5th principle of mind, and in the 5 planes of human evolution. These 5 letters, when sounded forth on the right note, give the key to the true inwardness of matter and also to its control. This control being based on the right interpretation of the law of economy.
Thank you, Ariane. First, the great word that peels through 100 years of Brahma, or persists in reverberation throughout a solar system, is the sacred sound of AUM. Okay. At the beginning of a solar systemic life cycle, and after a period wherein the purpose of the coming life cycle is visualized, the AUM is breathed forth. The sound activates devas on the evolutionary path, who are the great builders of the solar system, who have passed the human stage and with conscious understanding collaborate with the solar logos. The devas on the involutionary arc, the lesser builders who have not yet passed through the human stage, also respond to the sound, but unconsciously and through the power of the vibrations initiated by the solar devas, build the required forms out of their own substance. The AUM sequentially demonstrates on the three subplanes of the cosmic physical plane, on the first three subplanes of the in its purest form, the AUM sequentially demonstrates on the first three subplanes of the cosmic physical plane. All right, so then the A is the sea of fire, or the logoic plane. The U is the monadic plane, pure consciousness, and the M is the atmic plane and all the four planes beneath it, thus making the fivefold lower world, right? Next. In differentiation, and as heard in time and space, each of those three mystic letters stands for the first letter of a subsidiary phrase consisting of various sounds. So this is a summary statement of a much more extensive teaching given in IHS, or Initiation Human and Solar, which we're going to take a little bit of a look at now. So can we get a reader, please? Yes, Maria Christina.
The words of power, or the permutations of the AUM, exist in every possible tone, subtone, and quarter tone. And upon these shades of sound, the work of creation and its sustentation is built up. A multiplicity of sounds exists within each greater sound and affects different groups. It must be remembered also that generally and broadly speaking, the sounds within the solar system fall into two groups. One, the initiatory sounds, or those which produce manifestation or phenomena of any kind on all planes. And two, eventuating sounds, or those which are produced from within the forms themselves during the evolutionary process, and which are the aggregate of the tones of every form in any particular kingdom of nature. Every form likewise has a tone which is produced by the minute sounds produced by the atoms composing that form. These sounds grow out of the other group and affect inferior groups or kingdoms, if the word inferior may be used in connection with any department of divine manifestation. For instance, the human kingdom, the fourth creative hierarchy, was produced by a triple aum, sounded in a particular key by the three persons of the Trinity in unison: God the Father, God the Son, and God the Holy Spirit, or Shiva, Vishnu, and Brahma. This sound is still going forth, The interplay and interblending of the many tiny notes of each human being produces a great united sound which can be heard in the high places, and which in its turn is having a definite effect upon the animal kingdom. It is one of the factors which produces animal forms, both for human and animal occupation. For it must ever be remembered that man links the animal and the divine.
Thank you, Maria Christina. So, we get just a taste of the complexity of the use of the AUM from this extract from Initiation Human and Solar. You can grab that page number, by the way, 151 and 2, and that'll put you right in the center of this section on sound in that remarkable book. Yeah, okay. Next, one letter with a sequence of 4 sounds makes up the vibration or note of Brahma, which is the intelligence aspect dominant in matter. The first letter of the Brahma division of the threefold sound is the M, which has, we're here told, 4 subsequent sounds. We might assume that each of these 4 sounds corresponds with one of the 4 lower subplanes, with the M being a characteristic of the Atmic plane, and that these 4 sounds being the 4, each representing one of the lower planes. And we might also make a correspondence with the 4 rays of attributes and with the 4 elements, which has already been mentioned in Some Thoughts on the Gita, with the M itself standing for the 3rd ray and possibly for the element ether. Next, hence the mystery hidden in the pentagon. So we're talking about the M now and its 4 sounds, its 4 subsequent sounds. In the 5th principle of mind and in the 5 planes of human evolution. Bingo, that's, he confirms that. The mystery hidden in the pentagon, quote unquote, is related to the mystery of the 5th creative hierarchy shown here. Ruled by 5th ray Venus and called the Makara, or crocodiles, personified in ancient Egypt by the crocodile-headed god Sobek, about which DK says, it becomes the task of the 5th hierarchy, the mysterious beings that preside over the constellation Capricornus, or crocodile, in India and Egypt, to inform the empty and ethereal animal form and make of it the rational man. So we have a point of synchronicity here, by the way, since we are now studying Sobek in the Secret Doctrine series. Yeah. So Capricorn is 2 times 5. It's the 10th sign. DK makes a point of the fact that it's a multiple of 5. Finally, these 5 letters, when sounded forth on the right note, give the key to the true inwardness of matter and also to its control. This control being based on the right interpretation of the law of economy. Okay, the 5 letters of Brahma are a kind of vibrational formula, a sound encoded expression of the fundamental forces that underlie all material creation and which have the power to shape and influence physical reality. When, quote unquote, sounded forth on the right note, they resonate with the archetypal structure, the quote, true inwardness of matter. Unlocking this inward blueprint of the physical world is done by correctly articulating the vibratory key of the 5 letters. When sounded on the right note in full awareness of the forces involved, the 5 letters become a tool for controlling the processes that govern matter's formation, transformation, and eventual dissolution, hence the 3 aspects, right? Of course, this is very high level white magical work where the higher clairvoyance has come into regular use, and one can actually have a direct experience of the higher senses of the nature of the vibratory quality that's being manipulated through these 5 letters associated with the M of the AUM. Okay, any thoughts or questions? Fascinating stuff. Yes, Carol.
I think you said it, but I probably missed it. So I'm not familiar with that crocodile god of the Egyptians. So what did you say that it stands for and represents?
The 5th hierarchy, let me get back here again. So here is, this is an actual Egyptian artifact, and it represents this 5th hierarchy, which is a combined or a dual hierarchy that represents both the human personality and the human soul, because they're seen as one, since the soul is the true self. So this is all ruled by Venus. This is a source of the solar angels that overshadow us and has its home in Capricorn. Okay, and the energy associated with is Ichshashti, which is the will to manifest. Are you still glad you asked the question?
I'm still pretty confused. So is it once the soul and the personality are infused together, is that basically what it's representing?
What is what representing?
Once we get to this crocodile god, is it representing the human
Oh,
and personality and soul when they're totally infused? Is that basically what that means, or is it because of the way you worded it? That was my assumption, but maybe I didn't understand it.
right. Well, the bringing in the Egyptian idea of Sobek is going to be overcomplicating it because
Okay, that's
they,
okay. I'll just look it up then.
no. I just going to say because they have their own purposes around this great being. I don't know. Is Ben with us today? Ben Stock? Yeah, Ben. Can you speak to this this God? I know you have some awareness of the deities of Egypt.
Nah, the crocodile ate me a while ago.
Okay. I'll say this, that the hierarchy involved, that, and this really is more relevant to your question, um, is ultimately an expression of the soul aspect, right?
Okay.
Which we are, in truth, in extension, right? This is the idea that, you know, the personality is an illusion, a glamour, and a maya. And that when we get over ourselves, when we pierce that illusion, then we realize our true selves, which are the, quote, the perfect ones, who are identified with these forms. But DK talks about what a great mystery these identifications are, right? For instance, the crocodile is a creature of the deep, right? And if you just reverse where that deep is, you can see that they come from beyond our place of, you know, our place of endeavor, the lower quaternary. They came from above that and make themselves available to us. So it's a kind of reversed coming out of the waters, right? One way of looking at them symbolically.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. All right, we looked at that. All right, how are we doing on time? We still have enough time to read this. We get a reader, please. Thanks, Joe.
Another phrase, this time of 7 letters, or a letter for each of the 7 heavenly men, embodies the sound or note of the Vishnu aspect, the second aspect, logoic, the form building aspect. By its correct or partial sounding, by its complete or incomplete reverberation, are the forms built and adapted. The law of attraction finds expression in the manipulation of matter and its welding into form for the use of spirit. Then a third word or phrase is added to the other 2, completing the entire word logoic and producing consummation. It is a word of 9 letters, making therefore the 21 sounds, 5 plus 7 plus 9, of this solar system. The final 9 sounds produce spiritual synthesis and the disassociation of the spirit with the form. We have a correspondence in the 9 initiations, each initiation marking a more perfect union of the self with the all self and a further liberation from the trammels of matter.
Thank you, Joe. First, another phrase, this time of 7 letters, because we were just talking about the M and the 4 letters associated with the M making 5, or a letter for each of the 7 heavenly men, embodies the sound or note of the Vishnu aspect, the second aspect, logoic, the form building aspect. So whereas the Brahmic 5 letters were developed in the previous solar system, the 7 letters of the Vishnu aspect are in process of development in this solar system. The vibrational formula of these letters are expressions of the 7 sacred heavenly men and are thus also expressive of the 7 rays. Next, by its correct or partial sounding, by its complete or incomplete reverberation are the forms built and adapted. And of course, we're talking about the U of the AUM with this group of 7. So the 7 letters associated with the Vishnu aspect are in process of completion, right? They are, and that work is part and parcel with the purpose of this solar system. Decay contrasts correct and complete sounding and reverberation of these 7-fold letters with partial and incomplete sounding and reverberation, possibly because certain cycles are in process of being sounded and are thus partial in their expression. I would think those relating to the spirit, higher spirit aspect are more partial at this stage in the evolution of the solar system, whereas other earlier cycles have been completed. You know, this all reminds me of the fact that there are potentially 49 ashrams, right? With each of the 7 rays as the fundamental ashram, and then with each sub-ray also having an ashram. So you have, for instance, a second ray first sub-ray ashram, a second ray, second sub-ray ashram, a second ray, third sub-ray ashram, etc. And that some of these are well in the process of activity, are very active, whereas others are just exist in potential. I would think, for instance, that the first first sub-ray ashram is probably only exists only as pure potential at this point, right? That's very much like what's being described here. And with that, we're going to have to pull the plug. We'll pick up where we left off next time. Any final thoughts or questions from anybody? Okay, let's see here. So in terms of dates, next thing up is the Secret Doctrine, which is going to be on the third Sunday, which will be not the day after tomorrow, but the Sunday after that, which would be, let's see, the 13th. That'd be the 20th, I believe. Sunday the 20th. And then we'll have the following Friday, we'll have another Treatise on Cosmic Fire session. And then, as always, the Secret Teachings of All Ages will be on the first Sunday of next month. You know, it occurred to me when he was talking about the 21 sounds, which is here shown, the 21 sounds. For those of you who come to the Secret Teachings of All Ages, the middle panel of the Mensa Isiaka that we're studying is made up of 21 aspects, all emanating from the one aspect at the center. And I can't help but think that there's a direct association with what's being described here. Just a thought. Also a plug, because it's our least attended class, and it's actually quite fascinating. So you might give it a try if you haven't yet. Okay, until next time, which will be Secret Doctrine Sunday after this. Till then, take care.